everybody, welcome back to my channel, and I hope you are having a happy new year, and if you aren't, what else is new? This is the second time I've started this video. I filmed the whole thing and then I had to restart it again. My camera for some reason keeps cutting out. I've had to flip it so that I can see if it does that, so if the quality's not as good, I apologize. But I am very excited to talk to you in this video because I will be telling you the best books that I read in 2025 so you can read them in 2026. One of my goals in 2025 was to read more quality over quantity. I had just discovered that when I was reading, I felt like I was reading the same story over and over. Things were just becoming very formulaic. And it wasn't necessarily that I was getting bored, it was just that I knew there were so many more stories out there and I wanted to discover and read them. And so I wanted to branch out a little. So these are the best of the best that I read in 2025. So let's get started. The first, technically two on the list, are the When Among Crows duology by Veronica Roth. I loved these so much. I don't have the second one yet. It just came out in September, so I haven't gotten my hands on it, but like, you guys, you have to read these, okay? They are an urban fantasy, kind of a more dark, grittier world. There is a lot of Slavic folklore in this, and I loved it so much. It was so interesting and just like cool, first of all, but also I loved it. I loved it so much. It was very refreshing and unique and just so cool to read. I'm not sure how much of it is inspired or was drawn directly from folklore, but it was a very unique world and magic system. One of those hidden worlds within our own, sort of. And I really loved all of the creatures and all of the folklore aspects to it. That was really good. The other thing were I loved the characters so much. There's three main characters that we follow, and I just love them all so much. I love well-written characters. Like, really, that's all you need. That's the most important element of a book, are just well-written characters. And I loved these characters so much. They were just so interesting. They felt well-rounded, where they had their own personalities, their own flaws, their own strengths, their own motivations. But they also had their own secrets, and so you were constantly trying to figure out, like, what does this person want? What are they talking about, sort of thing. And they also worked so well together. Their relationships and the way they grew together was just so fun to read. Oftentimes with just normal-sized books, things can feel rushed when you have characters forming friendships or romances or whatever. It can feel rushed or unjustified, where it kind of feels out of left field, or when someone's making like some great declaration, you're like, this just feels like it doesn't have any merit to it. Despite this book being so small, the relationships formed and the feelings that the characters had for one another felt completely justified, just because this book was just raw. It was raw in its emotion, it was raw with its characters, and it was just beautiful. The second book also had it was the same thing, except for we got to see these characters who, you know, I appreciated that in the second book. It kind of took a step back and everyone was like, well, we've only known each other for like a week. And it was them now trying to navigate. We've had this crazy experience and bond, but do we really know each other? And deepening those relationships. But it also really, the second book was about family and how the people around you shape so much of who you are, and where you come from shapes so much of who you are, and how much you can love family, but also you can choose your family, and if you step away from that thing that made you who you are, you can become something new. They're both just so beautiful. The emotions are so raw, the characters are so interesting, and the world is just delicious. I love these books. They're very quick and easy reads. The narrator for the audiobooks is amazing. When I finished the first one, I think I read it in February, I immediately wanted to reread it. I wanted to just immediately go back to the first page, but I waited until like the second book had come out. I love these books. I've never read a Veronica Roth book, but this has made me want to dive into this author's works more. Just beautifully written, some really great prose, really cool world. It's quick, it's easy, definitely check it out. One of the best books, plus best other book that I read last year. The next ones are also 2 books, and that is the first 2 books in the Sunshine Court. Right now it's a duology, but it's gonna become a trilogy. Yay! If you have not read All for the Game, so these books are technically books 4 and 5, but they're also like their separate trilogy, because this trilogy, All for the Game, The Foxhole Court, comes first. If you haven't read these books, there is no real way to describe them to you. It's just not possible. I will sound like a insane person, but I'm gonna try. Basically, I'm actually gonna skip this whole description. Restart. If you haven't read All for the Game, there is no possible way to describe it to you. I actually just tried to, and I cut it because it just doesn't work. You can probably read The Sunshine Court without having read it, but I really, really, really wouldn't recommend it. These books are beautiful. They are, first of all, trigger warnings, but also just for such a wacky plot, they're written with such love and such care and have such heartbreaking emotions. And at the end of the day, all of these books are about people who are broken due to different circumstances, and learning how to heal, learning how to love yourself, learning how to love life, and learning to forgive yourself. And they're one of those books where you just like, you cannot put them down. You just keep reading. I think I read both of these books back to back in like 4 days. They're just addictive. The characters, the relationships, the plot, it's insane. Like, these books, all of them are filled with crack. Like, you can't stop thinking about them. The brain rot is insane. They're so good. They're so emotionally beautiful. I can't wait for the 3rd one. And then I found out we're getting a Kevin Day duology, which on one hand, I'm like, I need a trilogy. On the other hand, I'm just like, because he's my favorite. So yeah, definitely on the top of the list. If you want to know what these books are about, just go read a description, because I really tried, guys, and I just sounded like an insane person. Honestly, at this point, just like, maybe just go read them. Just go read them, because you're gonna read the description and you're gonna be like, what the frick? But I can't emphasize enough how good they are. So yeah. Going in a completely different direction for this 3rd book is Bloodchild by Octavia Butler. This is one of the most bizarre stories I have ever read. It is a short story. It's a short sci-fi story, and it's fucked up, but it's fascinating. So this follows basically like humans have fled Earth, or at least some humans have fled Earth. They landed on this alien planet, and there's these giant insectorial aliens that live there. And for a while, the like insects were just like killing them. But then part of the insects created like a pact with them to protect them from all the other creatures that live on the planet, and I think also some of the other aliens. But the pact is basically that the humans will carry the alien eggs, where basically like they partner up, they get like a partner, and then the alien lays the eggs inside the person, and then when they hatch, they have to cut open the person and get all the eggs out and then sew them up. So like you should live, but what happens is that the eggs, if they like don't get them out in time, you like will just like burrow and eat you and you die. So it's icky. It's icky. So the discussion around this story that is very interesting is that many of the readers who read it say that this is an allegory for slavery, in the way that the humans are treated, in the way that they are oppressed, in the rules that they have. They live on like this, they can only live in this small area, and they all live in like a house, and you're not supposed to have guns, and like you have your alien that's like part of your family sort of thing. And many people say because of the like oppression, it's an allegory for slavery. The author, however, says that in her mind, she wrote it as a love story, which is very different points of views. When I read it, I found the thing it reminded me most was symbolic of a cult, in the way that they raise up the young to believe in a certain way, in the way that there is often kind of this predatorial and awe of certain things. The other thing is that it's like the age of the characters is never really disclosed, and due to the language used, there's like, it's almost like sexual in a sense, and in the way that it seems almost like sexual assault in a sense. It's a very fascinating story. It's not just something light that you should pick up. It's something that if you want to read something that you're going to think about for a long time, and you're going to have a lot of different people saying a lot of different things, this is the book, this is the story that it's going to be if you want something like that. It is fascinating, I will say. Just the dynamics that you read in how different views in the story itself of this main character versus his brother versus the aliens. It's very interesting and it's very fascinating. I highly, highly, highly recommend listening to, I'll link it either in below or up here. Someone read it and it's on YouTube, and it's so insanely good, and like literally you just get chills, like you're like, whoa. But that was like, it brings it to a whole different experience. So highly, highly recommend that. But it was definitely one of those reads that I'm just gonna think about for the rest of my life, and very interesting. So that's why it's on this list. Super fun read. The next book on the list is also sci-fi, though maybe a little less fun, some might say. I loved it, though I will say it probably, many will not understand why. And that is I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream. This story changed so much for me. I love this story. Before I go any further, there is the written story, and then there is the radio drama. And I well, I read/listened to both. And I will say, if you're going to read them, they're both really good. With the radio drama for I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, I will say the hate speech, not hate speech, but the hate speech is expanded on, which is really cool because I love that. I love that part of the book. And kind of just like the emotions of the character. It was really good. If you like, I would say maybe reading this, I like reading/listening to the original story, and then if you like it, checking out the radio drama. If you want to just jump into the radio drama, I think you could do that too. Basically, this story follows the last 5 humans that exist, and they are being tortured for all eternity by Am. Am was a artificial intelligence that grew consciousness and began to hate all the humans and the world. And so they destroyed all the other computers, they destroyed all of civilization, they destroyed all the other humans, and they left these 5 that he keeps alive to suffer for eternity. And this story is just fascinating, not just because of the dynamics of the humans left in the way that they view life, view each other in this very kind of cynical way. But what really makes this story for me so interesting is Am, in that in his hatred for humans, he has embodied so many human traits, the worst and the nastiest of them. And in the radio drama, what gets expanded on is how he views humans and why he hates humans. Because in the original, you just get this really cool monologue about how much he hates humans. And in the radio drama, you kind of get this almost an explanation added onto it on why he hates humans, on the fact that they made him this thing that can't feel, that can't live, that can't ever be human. But yet he has to watch all of humanity and always be a part of it, sort of. It's really interesting. It's really fascinating. And it really shows the kind of best and worst of humanity on both sides of the scale. The next best read of 2025 was The Blade itself. This is the first book in the First Law trilogy, and I loved it so much. So I'd heard of this book, and I just really wasn't very sure about it. And my brother got it for me, and he's like, I've read it, I think you would really like it. And then he said, there is a character in it that reminds me of you, but also helped me like understand you better. And that character is Glokta. And if you haven't read the book, Glokta is a cynical, hobbled, cruel, older man who is a royal torturer and is disgusted by basically everyone and everything around him. And I'm not sure which is worse, the fact that my brother was like, this character reminds me of you, or that he was right. And I'm not quite sure what that says about me. But Glokta is someone I hold very close to my heart, because I would say he was probably one of the, if not the best, depiction of having chronic illness that I've ever read. And there was so many times where I was just like, this is what it's like. It wasn't like sugar-coated. I know I'm like getting off track on what the book is actually about. But one of the things that so often I see when people are talking about like, oh, like disability representation, or like chronic pain representation, or like chronic disease representation, is that it's mentioned and then it's maybe brought up like 4 or 5 times. But it's not present it's not really present in their narration, whereas this author really nailed home the point that, like, every aspect of your life and every thought is always, like, tainted and filtered through that. And so I very much appreciated and loved that. But what this book is actually about is, it's complicated, actually. I'm not quite sure how I would describe this. I should have read a description. If you like Game of Thrones, but maybe with a little less raunchy hacky sack action, I would consider checking out this book, because it is very much kind of that classic grittier fantasy. It has the large world building. It follows a lot of different characters who are kind of all collating at the end. It follows kind of a berserker warrior and his travels through the world. Gosh, what even is this book about? It's amazing. There's a lot of different storylines happening. I think it's, we're going to war, I think, is kind of what it's setting up to. But really good world building. Excellent written characters. The characters, chef's kiss. There are characters you like, there are characters you don't like, there are characters that you probably shouldn't like, but you do like. Everyone has their own agenda, everyone has their own motives. It's a twisted web. There's many different aspects of the story, which is why it's kind of hard to, like, narrow in on the plot. But it's really good, and it's written so well. If you love well-written, complex characters, definitely check out this book, because it was so good. Like, it was, I know I'm doing a terrible job advertising it, but it's so good. Definitely check it out. The next book is actually an entire series. I read all 3 of them. I couldn't get enough of them. They're my obsession. And that is the Devoured Worlds trilogy. And this is probably one of the best trilogies I've ever read, period. It's so good. This is high sci-fi. This is like Dune meets The Last of Us, maybe. It's so good. It is so well written, so well. The writing, the craftsmanship is incredible. The characters are incredible. The relationships are incredible. The world building is incredible. Very unique world building. I won't go into all the aspects because that'll take too long, but just some very unique aspects that were fascinating. So many aspects that were fascinating. I love the characters so much, and I love the relationships. And I will say the friendships were so important and vital and had a good focus on, and I love that. I love strong friendships. I also think this book had the best depiction of, like, love, truly loving someone I've maybe read. Like, the romance, it was one of those I'll find you in any body in any life sort of thing. That was just beautiful. It was beautiful. But also, I felt like it was also very realistic in the sense that our 2 main characters come from very different not worlds as in like worlds, but worlds as in lives. They've lived very different lives. They come from very different circumstances. They have very different views of the world. And so because of that, it's very easy to be prejudiced towards one another. And this book really showed how these characters were able to break down each other's walls and work through the many difficult discussions that it takes to be in a relationship. And sometimes, loving someone isn't always enough. You need to be able to understand them. You need to be able to stand by them. If you have different beliefs or different opinions, being able to respect the others, but also being able to find common ground. And these books really went in and discussed all of that, while also having just the most insane plot. Like literally, when from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, you felt like you'd read 12 different books just because of all of the twists and all of the turns and everything that was happening, and you were like, holy crap, so much. The author was not afraid to punch you in the gut. The author was to have written this and get it to like work, because there's so many aspects where it's just like, oh, that would have been so difficult to figure out. It was so interesting. It was so good. There's characters that you hate and by the end you love. There's characters that you love and by the end you're like, why? There's characters that, even though they're despicable, you're still given insight into their sort of mind. And it's just very interesting because you see so many different aspects and so many different viewpoints about the same world and life. It's about, there's rebellion, there's uprising, there's a lot of, what does it take to change the world? What are the sacrifices you're willing to make? When do the ends justify the means? I love Tarquin. He's just this nerdy little geologist who gets thrown into the wildest plot, and he's just like, I do not want to be here. I love Nora because she is such a strong, fierce character who also, I felt like she was such an incredibly well-written character where she had so much trauma and she had so much buried emotions, and she had so many, she was constantly not questioning herself, but she was constantly questioning things, but she was always confident in herself. She knew who she was, and she knew what she believed, and that was where she drew her strength. She was also a badass, and she was so cool. And all of the characters, just so incredibly well written, such a raw story, and such a cool story. It's such a good book series. It's such a good book series. I love it so much. One of the best sci-fi books you can read. It's fantastic. I'm pretty sure I rated like almost all the books 5 or 4 stars, so go read them. Trust me. The next book that I thought was one of the best was Killing Jesus by Martin Dugard and Bill O'Reilly. This book was very interesting because it takes a very historical look at the life of Jesus. It draws mostly, if not solely, on just historical records. And so you're learning about like what's going on with Caesar, what's going on with Augustus, and then you have what's going on in like the government with Herod, and then you have Jesus and why he was such a central figure to history. Because whether or not you're a Christian and you believe that Jesus was Christ, Jesus was a real person and figure. And I think that's what many people don't realize, is it's because I don't believe in God or I don't believe in Christianity, I don't think he was a real person. For some reason, I've noticed with Christianity, it's all or nothing. It's like, oh, I don't believe in the teachings, but I think he was a real person. It's no, all of it's not real. And so this book was very interesting. If you didn't know, the Romans kept incredible records where you can go see Jesus's like taxes, basically. This book was very interesting because it talked about why, it really helped show why he was such a central figure in history, both with the teachings, with the at that point with the synagogue, and then also with the Roman government, and why he impacted so many people. And I think if you are interested in just kind of knowing more about him, because he is the most important figure in history, basically, because he changed all of history. So if you want to know more about him, but you want it from a strictly non-religious viewpoint, I think this book is something that this might be the book for, because it's just from a historical viewpoint. I think it makes references to the Bible, but it doesn't use it as its like main source of information. But it's very easy to read, it's very easy to follow, and it's very interesting. So those are the best books of 2025. I loved all of them. Basically, it was just which ones I loved the most, which ones have had a lasting impression, and the craftsmanship and the writing of them were kind of what made them, in my opinion, the best. I hope some of these are ones you're interested in and maybe we'll read in 2026. And let me know in the comments which books read in 2025 that you consider the best books of that year. And I'll see more of you in 2026.